Long in this world, James. Look at you. You're invisible. Those were the last words Julian whispered to his wife, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise right in the center of London's most exclusive gala. He thought he was clearing the way for his success, cutting off the dead weight of his modest, quiet marriage to impress the elite. He opened the heavy oak doors and shoved her into the cold night, convinced he had just saved his reputation. He had no idea that the fleet of armored Rolls-Royces pulling up to the curb wasn't for the Prime Minister. He didn't know that the man stepping out wearing the royal crest of Calum was looking for his lost daughter. Julian had just evicted his wife, moments before the king arrived to kneel at her feet. The chandeliers inside the grand ballroom of the Kensington Palace Hotel did not just sparkle, they seemed to judge. Every crystal prism caught the light of 1,000 flashbulbs, refracting it onto the diamonds and silks of London's upper crust. The air smelled of expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5 Santal 33, and the metallic tang of old money. Julian Thorne adjusted his bow tie in the reflection of a passing waiter's silver tray. He was handsome, undeniably so, with the sharp jawline of a man who had fought his way up from the gritty streets of East London to the polished boardrooms of Canary Wharf. But tonight his eyes were darting nervously, scanning the room for approval. "Stop fidgeting, Julian," a soft voice said beside him. He looked down. James stood there, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She was wearing a dress of pale blue chiffon. It was simple, painfully simple, compared to the structural avant-garde gowns worn by the wives of the investors Julian was trying to woo. It was a dress off the rack, likely from a high street store, which she had tailored herself to fit her slender frame. "I'm not fidgeting." Julian snapped his voice a low hiss so as not to alert the nearby guests. "I'm strategizing. And you're standing on the hem of your dress. You look like a schoolgirl lost at a museum." James flinched, but her expression remained calm. Her eyes, a striking shade of violet blue, held a depth that Julian had never quite bothered to explore. "I'm just trying to support you, Julian. You said this night was important." "Important, James? This is the Crimson Charity Ball. Lord Holloway is here. The Duke of Sussex is rumored to make an appearance. My entire merger with Sterling Corp depends on me looking like I belong here." He took a sip of champagne, his knuckles white against the glass. "And honestly, James, you're making it very hard to look the part." James looked down at her shoes, simple nude heels scuffed slightly at the toe. "I thought I looked nice," she whispered. "I pin my hair up the way you like." "It's not about looking nice. It's about looking expensive," Julian muttered, turning his shoulder away from her as he spotted a potential client. For the last 3 years, this had been their dynamic. When they met, Julian was a struggling junior analyst, and James was a quiet librarian who volunteered at the animal shelter. She had been his sanctuary. She made him tea when he worked late, listened to his rants about office politics, and believed in him when no one else did. But as Julian's bank account grew, his memory of their shared struggles faded. He began to see James not as his partner, but as a relic of the poverty he was desperate to escape. She didn't know how to schmooze. She didn't drink alcohol. She didn't laugh at the crude jokes the bankers made. She was just there. "Oh, look, it's the Thornes!" A shrill voice pierced the ambient chatter. Julian stiffened. Approaching them was Isabella Vance, the daughter of the CEO of Sterling Corp. She was everything James was not: loud, dripping in rubies, and aggressively confident. She wore a crimson gown that left little to the imagination and cost more than the house Julian grew up in. "Isabella," Julian said, his voice instantly transforming into smooth velvet. He took her hand and kissed the air above it. "You look breathtaking tonight." Isabella smirked, her eyes sliding dismissively over James. "And you brought the little wife. How quaint." She leaned in, whispering loud enough for James to hear. "Is that the same dress she wore to the Christmas party last year, Julian, really? Sustainability is a trend, but poverty isn't." Julian's face flushed a deep crimson. "It's a favorite of hers. Sentimental value." How boring! Isabella sighed, linking her arm through Julian's, effectively cutting James out of the circle. Come, Julian. My father is over by the bar talking to the senator. He wants to ask you about the Q3 projections. You can explain it better than your emails. Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second. He looked at James. She was standing alone now, buffeted by the crowd, looking small and fragile. A decent husband would have included her. A loving husband would have defended her. But Julian Thorne was a hungry husband. Stay here, he ordered James, his voice cold. Don't talk to anyone. Don't embarrass me. I'll be back. He allowed Isabella to drag him away, leaving his wife standing alone in the middle of the ballroom floor under the judging glare of the chandeliers. James watched him go, a strange, sad smile touching her lips. She reached up and touched the small silver locket she always wore hidden beneath her dress. He really doesn't know, does he? She whispered to herself. An hour passed. James had retreated to the edge of the room, standing near a large potted fern, nursing a glass of sparkling water. She watched Julian work the room. He was in his element, laughing, shaking hands, oozing charisma. He looked like a king in his own mind. She checked her watch. A battered leather-strapped piece that looked archaic next to the Rolexes in the room. 9:45 p.m. They should be close, she thought. I tried to tell him. I tried to warn him. She had attempted to speak to Julian that morning. She had sat him down at their breakfast table and said, Julian, my family, they might be coming to visit soon. There are things I haven't told you. But Julian had been on his phone checking stocks. James, I don't have time for your country cousins coming to beg for money. Keep them away from the house while I'm closing this deal. He hadn't listened. He never listened anymore. Suddenly, Julian appeared in front of her. He wasn't smiling. He was sweating, and his eyes were wide with a mix of panic and fury. What are you doing standing here? He hissed. I'm doing what you said, Julian. I'm staying out of the way. Well, you're not doing a very good job. Lord Harrington just asked me who the depressing woman in the blue rag was. He thought you were the hired help. Julian wiped his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? I am trying to close a £50 million deal, and you look like you wandered in from a charity soup kitchen. The cruelty of his words caused a hush in the immediate vicinity. A few guests turned their heads, their eyebrows raised in amusement. This was the entertainment they loved, a domestic squabble among the nouveau riche. James straightened her spine. For the first time all night, the submissive posture vanished. She looked him in the eye, and the violet in her irises seemed to darken. My dress is clean, Julian, and I am your wife. If that embarrasses you, that is a deficiency in your character, not my attire. Julian blinked, stunned by her sudden defiance. Then his anger spiked. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. I don't have time for your sudden backbone, James. You are ruining this night. Isabella's father is watching. I can't have you dragging down my stock value with your presence. He began to pull her toward the grand double doors of the exit. Julian, stop, James said, her voice calm but firm. You are making a scene. I'm making a command decision, he spat. You're leaving, now. They reached the foyer. The doorman, dressed in red livery, looked away uncomfortably. Julian practically threw the cloakroom ticket at the attendant. Get her coat. The gray trench coat, the cheap one. Julian, James said, pulling her arm free. She stood in the center of the foyer, the cold wind from the revolving doors hitting her back. If you send me away tonight, you cannot ask me to return. Think very carefully about what you are doing. Julian laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound. Ask you to return, James. Look at this place. Look at me. And look at you. We are in different stratospheres. Go home to the apartment. Pack your things. I think it's time we discussed a separation. I need a partner who fits my future, not my past. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. James stared at him for a long moment. There were no tears in her eyes, only a profound sense of disappointment. She took the coat from the attendant, but she didn't put it on. She draped it over her arm. "Very well, Julian," she said softly. "I will leave. But remember, you were the one who opened the door." "Just go." Julian waved his hand dismissively, turning his back on her to head back into the warmth of the party, back to Isabella and the money. James turned to the heavy glass doors. The doorman pushed them open for her. Outside, the London rain was coming down in sheets. It was a miserable night. James stepped onto the pavement, the water instantly soaking her thin shoes. She stood there for a moment looking up at the gray sky. Inside, Julian grabbed a fresh glass of champagne, fixing his smile. "Apologies," he said to Isabella, who was waiting for him. "Just taking out the trash." Isabella laughed, clinking her glass against his. "To upward mobility, darling." "To the future," Julian agreed. And then the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of engines. Massive, powerful engines. The chatter in the ballroom died down as blue and red lights flashed against the high windows, washing out the warm glow of the chandeliers. But these weren't police lights. They were accompanied by the deep, rhythmic thrum of motorcycles, dozens of them. Julian frowned, walking toward the window overlooking the entrance. What is going on? Is there a fire? Below, the street had been cleared. Traffic was halted in both directions. A phalanx of police motorcycles, their sirens blaring in succinct bursts, formed a V formation. Behind them rolled a convoy that made the luxury cars of the guests look like toys. 6 black armored SUVs with diplomatic flags on the hoods. And in the center, a vehicle that was rarely seen on public streets, a Bentley state limousine, elongated and reinforced, flying a flag of deep royal purple with a golden falcon crest in the center. "The Prime Minister," someone whispered. "No," Lord Harrington said, stepping up beside Julian, his face pale. "That's a royal standard.